Well, there it is. The first round of the 2025 NFL Draft is officially in the books, and right now in the UK, it is 6:30 in the morning. No sleep for me, very little sleep for my co-host Nick Corbs, but nevertheless, we're going to be bringing you our initial kind of first take, first reaction, first round draft grades. Now, these are subject to change. The NFL Draft isn't just one round, and there's still a lot of talent left on the board, but these are just going to be our initial grades as of essentially a few minutes after the first round. Nu, how are you feeling?
Well, tired, Dom, but like I said, draft day, best day of the year. Always a pleasure to stay up, and can't wait to get into these grades.
Yeah, it really lived up, I think, to... I think it not overproduced, God, I'm tired, delivered, I think, this draft. They kind of under-promised and over-delivered, which is what we want. Now, just so we're clear, this is how our grading system is going to work. So an A+ is a home run pick. That is fantastic. That is a fantastic player at fantastic value, great fit, ticks every box. A is a great pick at great value, just not a steal that perhaps the A+ would be. B is a good pick, good player. You might have gone a different direction, but you can see the value and there's nothing bad about it. C is a fine pick, nothing awful, but not particularly good either. D is a bad pick, and F is a fail, a huge reach, left better talent on the board, unsure of the fit, all of those things. Now, we will also allow ourselves to do a little, plus minus here and there if we want to, but nevertheless, that's the outline. And I personally don't like just when I see draft grades being just all A's, all B's, like it diminishes the A's, I think. So I'm not trying to be a hater here. I'm just trying to give a broader range to help people understand what I think of this class, but my co-host might be different. So we started off this draft with the Tennessee Titans taking Cam Ward, the quarterback from Miami. What did you think about this pick, New?
Well, it was the expected pick, Dom, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that. For me, it's a solid B+ pick. He is going to improve that Titans team that is in desperate need of improvement. Obviously, people were saying Travis Hunter, but quarterback is the most important position in football, and I think it was a B+ pick in my opinion.
Yeah, I'm the same, New. I'm a B+. It's not like Cam Ward was a QB1 like Caleb Williams or Drake May. I would have given them like an A+ or like an A, I think, given the value of quarterback and given the fact that those are just like such great talent. But the Titans needed a quarterback. They got the best one in the draft. He's a nice player. I really kind of can't fault this pick. It was like a really sensible pick. Obviously, a little bit gutting that it was a weaker quarterback class, which does kind of diminish this last year's Cam Ward. In last year's class, Cam Ward would have been like QB4, maybe somewhere in that range. So you've got to take that into consideration that it is a weaker quarterback class. But fundamentally, the Titans probably did the better long-term thing here, maybe, considering that quarterback is the most important position in the game.
I think so, Dom. Yeah. I think anything else apart of Cam Ward would have been the wrong pick.
I don't know about wrong, but I know what you're saying. Now, at 2 overall, we had a trade. It wasn't the Cleveland Browns taking Travis Hunter like we all thought. It was actually the Jacksonville Jaguars who traded up to do so. What did you think of this, New?
I think the pick itself is an A, but the trade, I think they gave up too much value, Dom. So overall, I'm going to give it a B. I know because they gave up, 2026 one, a second this year, and was it a second next year, Dom, or a third next year?
No, it was like a third. The only notable picks were a second this year, 2026 first next year.
I think that's a lot to move up 3 spaces for a non-quarterback. On the display, they showed that it hasn't happened in over 2 decades. So it's a big gamble, but I think it's a good pick, so I'm giving it a B. But I'm not massively high on Hunter, as you know, Dom.
Yeah, you're a bit lower on Hunter than I am. I mean, I know they did give up quite a lot. Like, it's quite a lot to give up a whole first-round pick for a non-quarterback, generally speaking. However, I am going to give this pick an A because I think Brian Thomas Jr. with Travis Hunter is immediately one of the best wide receiver 1, wide receiver 2 pairings in the NFL. I think for the Jags, Hunter will play wide receiver full-time and might play some cornerback. I think that kind of fits best for the team. And I just think it helps Trevor Lawrence. Like, you spent the first overall pick on Trevor Lawrence not that long ago. He's never quite been the quarterback that we hoped he would be. He's shown flashes, but never really been able to string it together. With Liam Cohen, Trevor Lawrence, Brian Thomas Jr., and now Travis Hunter, I think that Travis Hunter is like a tone setter. Like, people suddenly care about the Jags. Like, when the Jags come over to London now, people are going to want to see them. Like, they're always going to be box office because of Travis Hunter, because of Brian Thomas Jr. I think that they got the most talented player in the class. I like this pick. I get that it's a lot to give up at first for a non-quarterback, like I said, but if anyone's worth it, it's someone like Travis Hunter, I think. So I am giving this an A. I think it is a good pick. You don't get the value quite, I guess, because you have traded up that first, but I still think this is an A pick. I think it's a really good pick.
Okay, so we'll go to the third overall pick now, Dom.
Yes, the Giants, your New York Giants.
So my New York Giants, I'm so happy they didn't pick Shador Sanders. And for me, this is an A. He's my number one overall player. Not a massive positional need, but I think he's going to be top 5 in sacks in his rookie year. Defensive Rookie of the Year, probably favourites going into the season. Great pick. I'm giving this an A.
Yeah, I'm with you there. I'm giving it an A as well. Like you said, I think Defensive Rookie of the Year is a really good shout there because he's playing obviously opposite Brian Burns on the other side, and then you've got Dexter Lawrence on the interior. That is a nasty trio of pass rushes, and I'm so glad. I mean, we knew it wasn't going to happen. The Shador Sanders at 3, we were pretty confident about that. I think towards in the last month at least. And yeah, it was the best player on the board. It makes sense. I think they should look to trade Thibodeau maybe in round 2, day 2, kind of look to see what they can get for him. He's kind of surplus to requirements now. You might need maybe another defensive tackle later in the draft, maybe to stuff the run. But the defense now is looking really good. You've got Drew Phillips, you've got Tyler Nubin, you've got Deontay Banks, you've got Javon Holland. Yeah. And then you've got those 3 pass rushers. That is a really good defense. And I think that the Giants will be a team that will lean heavily on their defense to stay in games. And we'll talk about their pick later. But, I think the Giants, all things considered, because I think it could have gone really badly for them, I think the Giants came out on this draft feeling pretty good about themselves. And I'm kind of in agreement there. That's why I'm giving this an A. Now, the 4th overall pick, New England Patriots taking Will Campbell from LSU. What do you make of this one, Nick?
It's always hard, Dom, because I think tackle was the right decision, and I'd remember over Campbell, but I don't have an issue with Campbell at all. It's hard because the top 3 players were so clear that there's always going to be a talent drop-off when it comes to the 4th overall pick. So with Campbell, it's, again, I hate to be boring, but it is just a B pick. I can't give it anything more. Yeah,
I'm also, by the way, me and New haven't, spoken about these draft grades before. We're hearing them for the first time, but I've also given this a B. I think it's just the definition of rock solid. I think Will Campbell's a rock solid prospect. He wasn't a top 5 prospect for me, but it's not that simple, right? You're not just going off a needless, teamless draft board like how we make it, right? We're not drafting for specific teams, and so our draft board's going to be different. I think Will Campbell was OT1. I think I've kind of been vindicated in that, perhaps. Mike Vrabel obviously sees Campbell as a tackle. I don't think you're drafting a guard at 4th overall in this class. Interesting. I wonder if they could have maybe traded down. I think a lot of people wanted to trade up for Genty, and I do wonder if perhaps the Patriots shouldn't have kind of taken those offers, maybe, because I agree with you. I think the fall off from Carter and Hunter and Ward to then the next kind of tier of players is quite big. So I really wouldn't have minded a trade down here, but fundamentally, they've got an offensive tackle to protect Drake May, which is what they needed, and they needed someone that could play on the left side because they have Morgan Moses and because they have Michael Onwenu on the right side. So for me, Will Campbell's a really solid pick, really solid player. It gets a very solid B. Now, the Cleveland Browns taking Mason Graham.
Yeah, so for me, it's an A+ trade. I think that is unbelievable value game. Mason Graham and a first is so good. It's an A+ trade for me, but I understand the despair from Browns fans. Always never seeming to pick the superstar and always trading back for future so you can pick a superstar in the future. I do understand their frustration, but I think Mason Graham is a very, very safe pick, and getting an extra first in a quarterback-heavy class next year, I think is a smart move.
Well, so what did you give it, New?
So I'm giving the pick itself a B+, but the trade an A+.
Are you not rolling those two things into one? Would you not then give it an A?
I probably could just give it an A, but Mason Graham is not on an A pick at 5, but I'll give it an A. I'll give it an A, including
Because this is what I'm saying now is that I think it's really good to like weigh up the whole pick, like not just the player you're getting, but like the value, the wider context. Who did you leave on the board? Did you trade down to get them? And I agree. I think the plus here is to have that 2026 first rounder for when they'll, presumably maybe trade up to draft a quarterback if they're outside of that range, or just have another player to draft in the first round if they are, say, a top 3 pick team for next year and they already have their quarterback with the first pick. Personally, I do like Graham, and I did have him as a top 5 player, so that's fine. I just don't really love the idea of passing on Genty and Hunter. Like, I know they didn't it's not that they passed on Hunter per se, they traded down, right? Like, it's not like they took a different player. But I think if you were in a position to draft both Genty or Hunter, and you come away with neither of those guys, I think you've kind of not drafted as well as you could have done, if that makes sense. I know Graham plays a better, more valuable position than running back. He plays defensive tackle, but I don't like this team. It was at its best when it had Nick Chubb. I know drafting a running back doesn't fix your run game at all, but I don't know, man. When Genty's there on the board, I would have taken him, I think, ahead of Graham. And also, I wonder if there wasn't the option for the Browns to trade down again, because I think the Broncos wanted to come up to the top 5 from 20. So I don't know. Overall, I like they got the 2026 first. Definitely, that really helps them. And I like Mason Graham as a player, but I don't love passing on Hunter and Genty. So I'm gonna give the overall pick here, their trade down, everything. I'm gonna give it a B. Like, I think that's kind of where I meet in the middle here. Now, the Raiders, speaking of which, at 6 took Ashton Genty.
Dom, probably the most talented, the best player in this draft. Regardless of position of value, Genty should have been the Heisman in my opinion. And for me, this pick is a B+, because it doesn't fix the core issues that the Raiders need to fix, but he's the best player available at the position they're picking him. And I think he's going to be a superstar in this league.
Yeah, I've given this an A. It's as simple as this. They got, like you say, blue chip player, one of the most talented players in this class, one of the best players in college football last year, if not the best. And the Raiders are a very unique team in the sense that their run game was terrible because their running backs were terrible. Their offensive line is actually pretty good. And so that's why I think that Ashton Genty to the Raiders is kind of a perfect fit. I do think that their wide receivers are a problem, but this is the thing, is that it's the first round. They might draft Jaden Higgins in the second now, and I might love it. So I'm not really going here for the Raiders in terms of, they haven't got a wide receiver yet. But I think this is immediately going to improve their offense. I think it's immediately going to improve their run game. He's a fantastic player. There's no value here because I had Ashton Genty as like a top 5 player. So it's an A for me. But I think this is a good draft from the Raiders. They got Brock Bowers now, Jacoby Myers. They've got Geno Smith. They've got a good offensive line. They probably need a good wide receiver now and later. But we'll see what happens later in the draft. Now the Jets with Aman Membu at 7.
Yeah, so Aman Membu was my 3rd overall player, my 1st overall tackle. And the Jets here were in a really tricky situation. In my opinion, this is when the draft actually started, was with the Jets.
Yeah, I agree.
And I think Membu was a good pick. I'm not sure. I think maybe Tyler Warren I would have preferred.
Oh, really?
But I don't mind. Tackle's obviously a position in need, and he got the best player available. So, again, it's a B+ from me.
I've been a bit more generous with this pick. I think this was a really sensible pick from the Jets. I really like the fact that they've got Fashanu now at left tackle, Aman Membu at right tackle, Elijah Vera Tucker at guard. They got Joe Tippmann at center. Like, that's a really good young offensive line. I like the fact that they've addressed that, and that if they look to draft a quarterback next year, maybe in 2027, who knows? It depends how Justin Fields plays, right? I mean, I suspect they'll be looking for a quarterback next year. But it just means that when they draft that quarterback, they're going to put that quarterback behind a really good young offensive line who is experienced, and it takes offensive linemen a year to get used to the league and really kind of understand how to play in the NFL from college. So I just think the Jets recognized where they were as a team and just drafted accordingly. And they took their medicine. They were never in the Shadur Sanders sweepstakes. They were never a team that was, will they draft a quarterback? They just sensibly took Justin Fields in free agency, gave him a nice bridge quarterback contract, and have bolstered the offensive line really nicely. I think this is a fantastic pick, frankly. So there's just no value there for Aman Membu, which is why it's not an A+, but I think it's a really good pick at 8. Now, we're getting juicy at 8 with the Carolina Panthers and Tetairoa McMillan. I did not see that coming.
Either did I, and I don't really know why, because it's such a good pick. It's an A+ pick in my opinion. The 2nd overall player on my board, and fixes a need. They're throwing to Xavier Leggett, Help me out here.
Jalen Coker, Adam Thielen.
Jalen Coker, Adam Thielen. Tessa McMillan can really step in and help Bryce Young. Really give him the tools to succeed finally. Because this is Bryce Young's final shot, I would say. And you got to surround him with weapons, and Tessa McMillan is the best weapon in this draft. A+, slam dunk for me.
Yeah, I'm with you. A+. I mean, we're McMillan guys, and we always have been. And you know what, New? We've been vindicated, right?
You have.
I love the fact that this wasn't Jalen Walker. I was really worried it was going to be. Defense is obviously still an issue, don't get me wrong, but they can spend... If I'm the Panthers now, the other 8 picks that we now have in this draft is all defensive players. I don't need to draft anything else. We've got running backs, we've got offensive line, we've got our tight ends, we've now got our wide receiver. I would just hammer the pass rush, basically. And there's some really good players still on the board, right? You've got Carson Swessinger, you've got Donovan Ezaraku. There are some really good players still left on the board, so I'm not that worried about that. And I just think, you nailed it. Give Bryce Young the best receiving threat, not named Travis Hunter, in this draft class. And I think in Dave Canales' offense, where there's a lot of in breakers and Bryce Young likes to throw over the middle of the field and he can throw with anticipation and he can have McMillan as that big-bodied receiver who's going to catch everything, not going to drop stuff like Leggett did. I love this pick. I mean, get one of us needs to get a McMillan Panthers jersey. Maybe I'll become a Panthers fan again. It goes. I just think that was a great pick, and it was something that I personally would have done, but I never would have thought that a team would do that with Teta McMillan. But like I said, vindicated. Now at 9, the Saints took Kelvin Banks Jr.
This is gonna be Kelvin Banks Jr. This was really hard for me. I'm gonna give it a B- because I think the Saints need so much more. And obviously tackle's such an important position of football, but I think they really need a spark. And with Tyler Warren still on the board, I just don't think Kelvin Banks was the right pick. He's not a bad player, but I just don't think it's the spark that the Saints need. So I'm giving it a B-.
I'd argue the Saints don't need a spark though. They're firmly in their rebuild, man. Why are you taking a cherry on top tight end if they haven't picked up Trevor Penning's 5th-year option, so they are one person down on the offensive line. They were one of the worst pass blocking units in the league last year. I know they're pass blocking for Derek Carr, who's not exactly the most mobile or the most creative, but I'm not a huge Kelvin Banks guy. I was a bit lower on him. I think he's very susceptible to a push-pull move. But I think, again, this is a sensible pick. I'm glad the Saints know where they are as a team. They're not trying to take a tight end and just think that that's going to fix the team. Nothing is. What's going to fix the team is eating a year of being bad, resetting your cap situation, and drafting good players. And I think getting Kelvin Banks at 9, a bit of a reach, but I think it's fine. I've given it a B. Now, the Chicago Bears at 10. This was definitely surprising.
Yeah, this was absolutely shocking to me. With Tyler Warren still on the board, why you'd go Colston Loveland is bizarre. So for me, it's going to get a D.
A D?
I can't give it F. I can't give it F because Colston Loveland is a good player still. But it's a massive overdraft in a position where you've already got Cole Kmet. Tyler Warren is an X factor. Colston Loveland is a plug-and-play tight end. Why are you having 2 Cole Kmets on the field? I think Tyler Warren was the right pick here, and not picking him makes us pick a D.
You know what? You've kind of convinced me a bit here because I've gone with a B+ initially, but I think I'm going to give it a B. Actually, I think you've taken me down to a B here. I'm going to lock in a B. I mean, I was also surprised. I think Tyler Warren was a better fit in terms of his position. The ability he can play different positions, and I thought in Ben Johnson's offense that would kind of be what he was looking for. And I do agree that I think he's better than Cole Kmet, and I think Bears fans love Cole Kmet way too much. I've gotten loads of hate for saying that he's a very average tight end. Colston Loveland's undeniably an upgrade. But they are kind of the same style of tight end, aren't they? You're right. They're both that kind of receiving first tight end. I know people like Loveland's blocking, and maybe he is a better blocker than I give him credit for. And I do know that Ben Johnson likes 2 tight end set stuff, and it is another weapon for Caleb Williams. I like it more than I expected. I had Loveland lower. I had him in the late teens. So I'm going to give it a B. Like I said, you have convinced me to take it down from a B+. Yeah, I think if they were going to go tight end, I think Warren would have been better. I agree with you, New.
Okay, so at 11, we got Michael Williams to the Niners. This is a hard pick to grade because I really believe in the Niners' ability to develop pass rushers and to develop players. So I really like the fit. I still think it's a bit rich for my blood. 11 for Michael Williams, I thought was more of an end of the first round player. So for me, it's just going to get a B.
Yeah, I'm with you. I'm also giving it a B. Clearly, the league wasn't very high on James Pierce Jr. and Mike Green. Character concerns, maybe, especially Mike Green, who's not even been drafted yet, not even been a first round player, and Jackson Powers Johnson, the other JPJ, James Pierce Jr. fell lower than we were expecting. We'll talk about him in a second. Frankly, because of that, though, that really only left Williams for me here, which was a slight reach, but like edge is a massive position of need for them. And I think Michael Williams can be a much better player than he was in the league. And the 49ers realistically cannot roll into the season with Yetur Gross-Matos as their edge to opposite Bosa, right? Like that's just not going to happen. So whilst this was Michael was like, again in the mid-teens, not an egregious reach by any means. I think it's absolutely fine. I think this is just a very solid pick. Actually, I've given it a B, and I actually do like the idea of Michael Williams in what's his name's defense, the old defensive coordinator who's come.
Salah.
Yeah, I do like the idea of that in Salah's defense. So I think it's a rock solid pick. I'm giving it a B. Now the Cowboys at 12 new Tyler Booker. Yuck.
Well, as a Giants fan, this pick's an A+, because what the hell are they doing drafting Tyler Booker? But as a Cowboys, from the Cowboys' perspective, this is a C, because I guess on a technicality, he's the best guard available, best pure guard in a position of need. But I don't think he's anywhere near a first-round talent. And that at 12 is a bad pick. Very old school, very Jerry Jones. Definitely a C for me.
I've gone C-. I've gone even lower than you. I know this guy is dependent on scheme. I know he'll be off boards for some teams entirely if they run, zone blocking schemes and outside zone and stuff like that. And I know that he helps improve the offensive line, which is how the Cowboys have been the best version of themselves over the years, right? By having a good offensive line. And he fits what the Cowboys are looking for, but it was a big reach for me on my board. I had Tyler Booker in the 40s, so drafting him at 12 it is fundamentally a reach. I would have been, Zabel, I would have been okay with at 12. I would have been, I would have gone with Donovan Jackson before Tyler Booker. I think I get that it's scheme dependent, but man, I just don't love Tyler Booker's inability to move. Basically, is what it boils down to. Like he's a behemoth, like he's a mauler, but it's a bit too old school, I think, for the modern NFL, at least for me. So at 13, the Miami Dolphins took Kenneth Grant.
Yeah, Don, what are your guys? I think they could have focused on line here, but I think all the top tier O linemen were gone off the board. I think it's a simple BPA, best play available pick. So for me, it's a B+.
Yeah, I've gone with an A. I love this guy. And actually, initially, I was quite surprised because I thought it was going to either be a corner because that's what they need now that Ramsey's gone and Storm Duck is starting, or it was going to be an offensive lineman. And I didn't really think that Kenneth Grant was ever going to be an option here. And I love the player. I love the fit. He's replacing Christian Wilkins, who obviously they couldn't replace last season. He's a nose tackle who can stuff the run and rush the passer. I think the Dolphins' defense got a lot better by drafting Kenneth Grant, much more so than I think the offensive line would have got better if they drafted an offensive lineman, if that makes sense. So I gave this an A. I thought it was a really good pick. I mean, look, Tua and the offensive line and the offense isn't looking great. And I'm sure they'll draft an offensive lineman, and I'm sure they'll draft a running back because the Dolphins always draft a running back, I feel. And yeah, I just think Kenneth Grant was a really good pick, one of my guys. I'm glad to see him go early. Now at 14 noon, the Colts took Tyler Warren from Penn State. What do you think of that?
A+ pick, Dom. We were, I think, the first people on the planet to mark Tyler Warren to the Colts, although back in November,
That's
December.
so true, yeah.
We've been hammering this agenda for genuinely months. And again, we've been vindicated. And again, I've said it all before. He can be Anthony Richardson's best friend. How about in the run game? How about in the short to immediate pass game? Be a weapon, be an X factor. For me, it's a slam dunk pick, A+.
Yeah, if you'd asked me if this draft happened like 2 weeks ago, I also would have given it an A+. But I'm actually going to give it an A because yeah, it's a great player, it's great value. The fit also works, but that's the kind of thing where it trips up for me a little bit. Is I'm just not sure about getting another offensive weapon. You've got AD Mitchell, you've got Alec Pierce, you've got Michael Pittman, you've got Josh Downs. I know none of them are tight ends, so Tyler Warren, will be on the field. And with Shane Steichen and the RPOs and the style of offense he runs with yards after the catch, it's a great fit. I just think that, for the team, it might have been better to go with a defensive player here, like a Jihad Campbell, but obviously he might have had medical concerns. But I just don't know about, if this team really needed or really will value, because it has so many mouths to feed on this offense. I don't know if it will really value Warren in a way that he would have been valued on, a different team, if that makes sense. But nevertheless, I still really like the player. I still love the fit. It's an A for me overall. But yeah, I just think maybe I would have gone a different direction, which is just taking it down that one grade boundary for me. Now, 15. Falcons took Jalen Walker. He was announced as a defensive end from Georgia, which is rich. He's a linebacker, might be an edge rusher.
Well, edge is such a positional need for the Falcons, and I do see it with Walker. For me, he was a first-round pick. For you, I think top of the second. But I do see the traits, and I think because James Pierce Jr. and Mike Green had clearly some significant character concerns that were clearly meant they were off most teams' boards. I don't have an issue with it because factoring in those two things, I'm going to give it a B.
I've gone with a D.
Really?
15 is just rich for me with Jalen Walker, man. He's not a full-time pass rusher, which is what they need. He's a big projection. He could end up being good, don't get me wrong. But yeah, I think the Falcons had a nightmare of a draft here, frankly. And this pick kind of started it off a little. Somehow it got worse than this. You know, I'm no Jalen Walker guy. I've said it before. I think he's a kind of jack of all trades, master of none. I'm not sure if he'll be able to kind of really play a single position full-time. And I don't really think that defensive coordinators in the NFL know how to use positionless guys. I think you actually just end up being positionless, like you do not have a position to play. And yeah, I just think that people like Walker because of the extrapolation of his physical and athletic traits when I personally didn't see that really be true. Like, you know, when he was fine at rushing the pass, a decent pass rush win rate. But again, I would have gone in a different direction, but it's hard, obviously, when James Pierce Jr. and Mike Green went so late. Like, it's kind of, you know, maybe we were missing something, but just on my board, how it was, you know, with the facts I had in front of me, I'm giving this a D. Now, the Cardinals taking Walter Nolan from Ole Miss, the defensive tackle.
So I wasn't massively high on Walter Nolan. I think he's got a lot of development needs to go. He doesn't really have a pass rush plan. I think he's very bullish, and he doesn't really know what he's doing. I gave this pick a C- because it's very uninspiring. I really think the Cardinals. I think this is a very difficult position. I think this is where the draft really sort of started to plateau a bit. And if I was Cardinals, I'm really looking for a trade or something because I just don't think Walter Nolan is the answer to your problems. I think it's just a very boring pick, but not in a good way. So for me, that gets a C.
So I got to keep rubbing my eyes because my eyes are like closing on me over here. Yeah, I went for a C+. I mean, I didn't have Walter Nolan in my 32, so it's a reach for me. So immediately it's kind of capped at like a B- or whatever. I can kind of see the vision, which is why it's not just like a pure C or a C-. Like, I get what they're doing. Like, they have a really strong defensive line rotation now. Like, they've got Darius Robinson. They have BJ Ojolari. They now have Walter Nolan. I think that you need those guys to take a step, and Walter Nolan will help that. And it's another kind of body to really help rush the passer and cause havoc along that defensive line. So I kind of get it. And the Cardinals really could have gone in any direction here with how they approach free agency. So maybe it was best player available for them, which is always a luxury to do if you've built well enough as a team. But yeah, I mean, at 16, I wouldn't have gone with Nolan, frankly. I didn't have him as a first round pick. I would have gone with, you know, Derek Harmon. If you're looking for a defensive tackle since Kenneth Grant's gone, I might have gone for a wide receiver, maybe, you know, if one of those were on the board to pair with Marvin Harrison Jr. So, yeah, or a cornerback. You know, we had Will Johnson on the board again, another player who hasn't gone even in the first round, which is absolutely bonkers. But yeah, for me, uninspiring, I would describe this pick as. Now, the Bengals at 17, Shamar Stewart. Yuck.
I'm going to give this another C, Dom. Because the Bengals, I think, are sort of in win now mode with the contracts they're handing out. And Shamar Stewart is a developmental pass rusher. You know, no more than 2 sacks in any season over his 3 years in college. So I don't really understand it because they need help on the defense now that Shamar Stewart cannot give. And it's a terrible fit. So yeah, C for me.
I've gone with a D+. I've gone even lower. Like the board really wasn't kind to the Bengals, I think, at 17. No. Like, I think the draft really got ugly for them. Like, Kenneth Grant had gone, Michael Williams had gone. Clearly the league was a lot lower on James Pierce Jr. and Mike Green. I just don't like Stewart, frankly. I don't like Stewart. I'm with you. He wasn't a first-round pick for me. Drafting him at 17 is rich. Your Donovan Ezeraku on the board. Again, he's still on the board, but it doesn't matter. I had him higher. Nevertheless, it doesn't matter if the league's lower on him. I think he's great. Derek Harmon was there as well. Didn't need to be an edge. It was just defensive line they needed. And yeah, I know Ezeraku's not got a high ceiling with his lack of power, but you've got the leading sack and pressure rusher off one side. You can draft a 2 at 17. I think that's fine. So yeah, I know the board wasn't kind. I just don't like Stewart, and I don't like the players they left on the board. So it's getting a D+ from me. Now the Seahawks, I mean, they were obviously listening to our mock drafts as well. They drafted Gray Zabel, the offensive line from NDSU. What do you think?
I think it's an A. Gray Zabel is one of my guys. Really showed out at the Senior Bowl, really put himself on the map, and I think he's so solid. I think he's a better guard than Tyler Booker. I think he's so versatile. He can even play tackle. He can even play center if you really wanted him to. Seahawks need help on the offensive line, and they picked the best player available. For me, B+.
Yeah, rock solid pick, B+. I mean, it's a good marrying of need, of talent, of value. I had Zabel at like 19, so like it's exactly where I expected him to go. It helps Sam Darnold. It improves the worst interior offensive line in the league massively. It's just a great pick, and the Seahawks were at the mercy of the other teams ahead of them. It was a bit brave to go into the draft with such a glaring need, but look, paid off. They got Gray Zabel, B+. Can't fault it. Now at 19, I have a lot to say about this pick. The Bucs taking a Meckreg Buka, the wide receiver from Ohio State.
So I was much higher on Buka. I had him as the 16th player. No, I actually think I had him at 19. Sorry, I don't have my big board up with me right now. But this is clearly the Chris Godwin replacement, right? It's clearly the number 2 receiver. Still keeping Mike Evans at number 1. So for me, I think this is a B pick. I've been much higher on Booker than you have, and I think he's a plug and play guy who we should be looking to draft in our dynasty draft.
I was just checking. Yeah. You said it's a Chris Godwin replacement, New. They signed him to a 3-year deal for $44 million guaranteed in March.
Yeah, but he's not going to be the same player. That's you saw it last year with Penix and Cousins. Sometimes it's just a disconnect, I guess.
I don't know. This pick just makes no sense to me. Mike Evans is no spring chicken. You can draft a wide receiver 1. You don't need to go for a swing for the fences with a player that has a ceiling of a wide receiver 2. Do you know what I mean? You don't need that when you've re-signed Godwin. Why re-sign Godwin then? Or you drafted Jalen McMillan last year. Go for wide receiver 1 potential. Why re-sign Godwin and why draft McMillan? It just makes no sense to me. I think there were also the Bucs left Jahdae Barron and Jihad Campbell on the board, which I think was crazy considering how well they fit that defensive scheme and how much higher I had them than a Meckreg Buka, both those players. Maybe less so Barron, but I appreciate that Barron would have been a really good fit for this team, so I wouldn't have hated him at 19. But Jihad Campbell, that would have been a fantastic pick. I just can't believe. I'm sure there's injury concerns, whatever, but the Eagles took him at 32, so he didn't fall out the first. So I don't know. I think this was a very odd pick. I've gone for a C-. It just doesn't make sense to me fundamentally. But look, the pick after, Denver Broncos did go with Jahdae Barron from Texas. What did you think?
Well, I think it should have been Will Johnson, but I'm still high on Jahdae Barron, so I gave this pick an A because I think him and Pat Surtain could genuinely shut down corners. A no-fly zone. Think back to the days of Aqib Talib. I really think this Denver Broncos defense could be the best in the league. And they've only made their strength stronger, so for me, it's an A.
I mean, this is what I said when I was doing the TalkSport draft coverage, is that I think it's initially it's a really interesting pick because the Broncos run a lot of press man coverage. Pat Surtain is kind of infamous for that, following wide receiver 1, erasing them. Jahdae Barron doesn't play press and doesn't play man. Not that he can't, but he didn't do that at Texas really at all. He's someone that you want in off coverage, in quarters, with their eyes on the quarterback. And so I thought initially that it was a questionable fit with the amount of man coverage that the Broncos run. But I do think that they are actually going to stick with Riley Moss and Pat Surtain as the outside corners. And I think Barron's been drafted purely as the nickel. And really, when they also added when they added Hufanga and they also added Dre Greenlaw, I think that if they're blitzing, if Hufanga's on the line of scrimmage, if Greenlaw's, then Barron can be that zone guy who fills in for the blanks of the other defensive players, if that makes sense. So I think he's going to be a pure nickel. I don't think he's going to be an Aqib Talib kind of roaming press man corner kind of player, because he hasn't been that. He might be, but he hasn't been that. But I do think that I'm not that high on Barron. I do like the vision here. I do think nickel's an increasingly valuable position with the NFL being in 11 personnel all the time, and you need to have 3 good cover corners on the field. So look, and like you say, the best defense added a really good player and made their strength stronger. So I've given it a B. I think it's rock solid. Now the Pittsburgh Steelers also did not draft Shedeur Sanders. They drafted Derek Harmon from Oregon.
Yeah, I really thought this could be Shedeur Sanders, but what a Steelers pick. A tough lineman, gritty. As you said, I think I had the highest pressure rate of any defensive tackle in college.
55 pressures.
For me, because they didn't address the quarterback position, we'll see on day 2, maybe they trade up. But it's such a glaring need with Joe Flacco and Kenny Pickett. I can't give it more than a B.
Really? What, so you think they should have drafted Sanders here?
Well, I think it's what happens when you don't address a need properly in free agency. Is you can't do best player available because
but is
the
Sanders
Steelers famously go 8-8 every year. Sorry?
Is Sanders the best player available at
No,
20?
I'm saying you can't go best player available when your quarterbacks are Kenny Pickett and Joe Flacco. But that is not. They're not even they're barely even a serviceable backup. The Steelers' main goal is to go 8-8 every year.
Yeah.
And with this current quarterbacks, they cannot do that. If they were to address it properly in free agency, they can just go best player available, which I think Harmon could be. But because of their lack of initiative in free agency and trying to go for Aaron Rodgers, who's like one of the worst blokes ever, they now are stuck in not even quarterback purgatory, quarterback hell, I would say. So they backed themselves into a corner and then tried to play smart and ended up with no quarterback. So for me, I that's not Harmon's fault. So that's why I'm giving it a B.
I don't think they backed themselves. I know they did through free agency and they have through their like just general team building by not having a quarterback on the roster. I get that, but I think they weren't going into this draft expecting to draft Shedeur Sanders in the first round. Like I think Derek Harmon's actually a really good fit. Like Hayward is 36. He's a really good pass rusher. He's going to help out TJ Watt on the edge, who's getting a little bit older now as well. Like, I love the play. I think it's good value. It makes the defense better. They didn't reach on Sanders, which I'm really glad about. I'm also kind of factoring that into this grade as well. I'm giving it an A. I think that was a really good pick. I know they don't have a quarterback, and they don't have a second round pick either, so they're not going to be drafting a quarterback in the second. So they're looking at the Will Howards, the Tyler Shooks, the Kyle McCords of this world. But I do expect them to draft a quarterback in this draft at some point. Now the Chargers at 22, Amarian Hampton from UNC.
Dom, you know who mocked Amarian Hampton to the Chargers back in December?
You.
I did indeed, and I started a trend, Dom. You know, the NFL clearly listens to our pod, clearly listens to the YouTube, watches the YouTube. I think it's an A pick. It's such a Jim Harbaugh pick. It's a run the football pick. It's a fundamental football pick. And I absolutely love it. I think it's such a good scheme fit, especially with Colson Loveland off the board. You know, with J.K. Dobbins, they were running him into the ground, and he was already injury prone as it was. So I think this is a good pick at a good value. 22, it's an A for me.
Interesting. I've gone for a B plus. I'm a little bit lower on it than you. I think the board also wasn't that kind to the Chargers here. I think Kenneth Grant would have been good, a pass rusher would have been good, a receiver would have been good, and also them not going Will Johnson, despite there being Jesse Minter, the defensive coordinator who he played with, them being Harbaugh, who again he played with. The fact that they didn't even touch him in the first round at 22 says a lot. I think it's really interesting. I personally would have gone with Henderson here. I think having that that thunder and lightning Detroit Lions-esque approach to the backfield and having Harris as the thumper, Amarian Hampton as the scalpel person is what I would have gone for. But I appreciate what you're saying, that having two downhill thumpers in Najee Harris and Amarian Hampton when they're under the watchful eyes of Harbaugh and Roman, who love running the ball and love running smash mouth football and all that stuff. I get it, and I really like Hampton, so I'm giving it a B plus, despite it kind of being a running back whose skill set overlaps quite a lot with Harris, if that makes sense. I think it's good to diversify.
I don't rate Harris at all, though. He was a bad first-round pick, 5 years ago, and he can't move. He's so slow.
Well, fair enough. So the Packers, the hosts at 23, did you hear the roar from the crowd for this one when they took Matthew Golden from Texas, the first receiver in the first round they've drafted since 2007?
Well, Dom, I think this is the right area for Golden. I know you're low on him, and I was slightly low on him, but I have no issue with him at 23. And the Packers needed a wide receiver, and maybe Golden could be the X factor that this receiver room needs. So for me, it's going to get a B plus.
Yeah, I know I am lower on Golden, but this is kind of the range where I'm like, okay, it's not like an egregious reach, so it's not getting a D, it's getting a C plus from me. So it's on the fringe of like a good pick. I can kind of see the vision. I just don't like the fact that Golden doesn't really fill what they actually need. Like, the Packers need an alpha outside wide receiver one. Matthew Golden's 5'11", 191 pounds. Jaden Reed's 5'10", 187 pounds. Romeo Doubs is not the outside wide receiver one, and Christian Watson is injured and was kind of questionable if he could be that guy before then anyway. So I think this is kind of the top end of the range where I'm like, right, it's not an egregious reach. It's not getting a D or anything like that, or even just a C or a C minus. But I do think that it's another wide receiver too. And I also wonder if Golden's going to really work in the offense when he's not really shown he's a yak threat. And Matt LaFleur and his offense kind of relies on those guys being that. So I'll be interested to see what happens. I mean, look, just because they haven't done it doesn't mean they can't do it. Maybe I'll eat my words, and maybe he'll be, a yards after the catch monster. I mean, anyone, if LaFleur can make Malik Willis look like a competent quarterback, then I'm sure he can get Golden some yards after the catch. 24. The Minnesota Vikings took Donovan Jackson. This was surprising to me.
Yeah, for me, this is a C+ pick because I think Donovan Jackson's a good player, and I understand why they went guard. But with Malachi Starks on the board, with Nick Manwari on the board, who I thought Brian Flores could have really used to elevate this Vikings team, I can't get more than a C+. It's sort of confused me a bit, Dom. What do you think?
I was really confused initially, because obviously they signed Ryan Kelly and Will Freeze in free agency. That's a center and a guard, respectively. They got Christian Darrisaw at left tackle. So I didn't really think offensive line was as a need. Not that you need to draft for need by any means, but I didn't think it would be high on their priority list with a first round pick, considering the Vikings have the least picks in this draft. They've only got 5, so I thought they might trade back. And this was a little bit of a reach for me. Donovan Jackson was on the 40s in my board, but I'm looking at their offensive line. Christian Darrisaw, Donovan Jackson, Ryan Kelly, Will Freeze, Brian O'Neill, left through to right tackle. Their offensive line is set now. And for their young quarterback, JJ McCarthy, that's invaluable. To have now Justin Jefferson, Brian Thomas Jr., to have Justin Jefferson, to have Jordan Addison, to have TJ Hawkinson, to have a good offensive line, I just think that's it's not just about the player you're getting, it's about the wider impact to the team. And I think Donovan Jackson's kind of impact is actually much bigger than his position of just a guard, or really his value is showing, if that makes sense. So I'm giving this a B+. I think that this was actually quite a surprisingly fine, good pick for me, even though when it first happened, I was like, well, that's a reach, that's a bad pick. Now, the pièce de résistance of the first round here. At 25, the Giants traded back up into the first round with my Houston Texans, meaning there was no first round pick for the Texans, and they gave up to do so 2/3. Right, they just gave up 2/3 to trade from 34 or 33 to 25.
Oh yeah,
2 conditional thirds or whatever it was, and they took Jackson Dart from Ole Miss. What do you think of this?
It's so hard because I'd say this borderline pick of the draft. If you go on social media, this is all everyone's talking about: Jackson Dart to the Giants. I don't hate it. I had Jackson Dart as 31, ranked to my big board, 31st rather, and I've been going back and forth this in my head because he's not going to see a snap this year.
Well, you
hope. I think we can both agree on that. Jameis Winston and Russell Wilson are definitively better quarterbacks than him right now. So a much further pick compared to a Shedeur Sanders, for example. 25 is quite rich, but I don't mind what they gave up to get him. And with that potential 5th year of control, especially with the players going to need 2 years to develop, for me, it's getting a B, but I can't give it any more. What do you think? I'll be interested to hear your take.
I'm going with a B as well. I think that really the Giants did quite well in this draft because they had their backs up against the wall, and they could have really ballsed it up, if we're being honest. And I think giving up 2/3 to come back up into the first round, I love that value for a quarterback.
It was their lower third as well. It was pick 99.
Yeah,
so they still got pick 65 as well, and an extra third.
As a Texans fan, we kind of got fleeced there, but I for the Giants. 2/3 to go and draft a quarterback and get your guy. I love that. And I quite like the player and the fit. I mean, you hope that Brian Dable can kind of reenact what he did with Josh Allen, right? And kind of actually develop this guy. And Dart was a reach on my board. This was a reach, but I think it's a bit different with quarterbacks because it is the most valuable position. You do need to get your guy. And I just hope that he sits and develops for a year like JJ McCarthy would have done, like Jordan Love did do, and learn the offense because he had 30 snaps under center. He had a lot of, one-step dropbacks, predetermined reads, half-field reads, he drops his eyes really quickly. So he's got a lot to learn. I just fear, and this is not really related to the draft because I didn't really know how to bake it in. It's not really fair. But I am worried that because he's been drafted in the first round, a lot of fans are going to want to see him. If the Giants go
of course
3-7 to start the season with Russ or with Jameis or a combination of both, people are going to want to see Dart. And I wonder if to try and save their jobs, because they're still on the hot seat, Dable and Schoen, if they chuck Jackson Dart in there and then they really mess up his development, because I think for him playing this year, he should really redshirt basically. Him playing this year would be like trying to drink through a fire hose in terms of his learning and his adapting to the league. So it's a reach, but it's a QB. I'm going B. I think this is actually really not that bad considering what could have happened. Now, 26 is my real conflictor for me. James Pierce Jr. to the Falcons at 26.
Yeah, so we're just going to ignore all the off-field stuff because we can't really talk on it. But as a pure player, here's my edge 3. And to get him at 26, I thought it was great value. Don, would you be able to remind me on what the Falcons gave up?
Yes. So the Falcons, this is what is killer about this trade. So I love the player, right? I had him at 12. Loved to get in a vacuum to get James Pierce Jr. at 26, even with the character concerns. Love it. Absolutely love it. They gave up, though, considering that the Giants gave up 2/3, and I know they were coming up from 34 and not 40, but whatever, 2/3. And that was for a quarterback, mind you, the quarterback tax, which gets factored into these trades. The Falcons gave up a 2026 first-round pick in this trade. Yeah. Crazy.
What? Yeah, because I'm not gonna lie, I was sort of in and out of consciousness at this point in the draft. So I think I must have missed that.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah, they gave up a first-round pick next year.
That's an F.
Yeah.
I thought I was going to give a bit more of a balanced take, but James Pierce Jr. is not worth 2 1s.
I agree with you. I agree with you.
So so that's got to be an F pick. I think that's. I thought it was like a second and a third and next year second. I did not realize it was a next year first.
Yeah, it's a 2026 first, which obviously for the Rams is fantastic. They get to next year make a trade up for a quarterback if they need to draft one. But for the Falcons, a first when the trade before yours didn't involve a first and it was for a quarterback.
Not even a next year second.
Sorry?
It's ridiculous. Not even a next year second.
It's bonkers. It's bonkers. I have initially given this a C, but actually I think that's way too rich. It's because I love James Pierce Jr. at 28. That would be an A+, but it's not. You gave up a first. So I'm gonna go with an F as well with Union. I'm gonna go with an F. I just think that's a fail. You've ballsed it up. That was not the right thing to do, unfortunately. I'm with you. I'm giving it an F. I'm locking that in. Yeah. 27, the Ravens, Malachi Starks.
God, the Ravens, man. Why doesn't everyone just draft like the Ravens and the Eagles? They make it look so easy, don't they, Dom? They never trade up, never trade down, pick the best player available, and they're always good. For me, Malachi Starks at 27 is an A+. Easy A+. Such great value for a player of his caliber. And on that Ravens defensive scheme run by, what's his name? He used to be defensive coordinator for the Giants.
Oh, no, not Giants. Wink Martindale.
Yes. He's gonna be schemed up all over the place. For me, this is an A+ pick.
Yeah, A+. Great player, great value, great fit. Top 10 player for me. It allows Hamilton to then roam the defense again, not have to play free safety, he can play close to the line of scrimmage. A+, definition of. 28, the Detroit Lions took Tyleik Williams from Ohio State.
For me, this is a C. That's a big reach on a player who I had a pretty firm second-round grade on. Especially when I think you could have gone edge 2 to pair up with Aiden Hutchinson. I don't think this was the right pick.
Yeah, I'm giving it a D. I've gone even lower. This is just a very Lions pick, I think. Like, when they drafted Jack Campbell, when they drafted Jahmyr Gibbs, it's a reach and it's a very Lions pick, run stuffing defensive tackle in the first. I don't love drafting those guys in the first. I think you can get them in 10 a penny in free agency. And he was a fringe top 50 player for me. So at 28, that's rich. And I just think the Lions needed to draft an edge 2. And I know Williams is a defensive lineman, but he's not an edge. And maybe offensive line. They had Josh Simmons was still on the board at this point. I could have gone cornerback as well. Siobhan Revel maybe. I had better players on the board. This was a reach. And I don't think it really fits what you want to do in the first round, personally, which is, I think, swing and hit on a big player that's going to make an impact. However, I would say, preface, Lions fans, me and them don't always see eye to eye, it seems. I will say that the Lions picks do always kind of turn out.
They do.
I'm happy to be wrong about this. I was wrong about Jack Campbell. I was wrong about Jahmyr Gibbs. I'm happy to admit that. So, look, in a few years, this could age badly, but right now, it's a D. Now, last 3 picks. Washington Commanders took Josh Connolly Jr. from Oregon.
Yeah, Dom, for me, this is just a B.
Yeah, B for me as well.
I had him around here on my big board. Commanders needed a tackle. There's not really much to say about it, to be honest with you, Dom.
Yeah.
It's just a B.
Yeah, starting caliber tackle at 29, rock solid B. Bills took Maxwell Hairston, the cornerback from Kentucky.
Dom, I loved him in the green room, dapping up every single player that got drafted before him. Really want to see everyone succeed. He sort of became like a bit of a story throughout the draft. Also, ran a 4.28. Was it 4.28, Dom?
4.29, 4.28.
4.49. Yeah, I really like this pick. I think he can be really dynamic on that Bills defense, which you saw was the reason basically why they lost to the Chiefs in the AFC Championship game. I think another corner of a starting caliber can be the thing that brings them to the Super Bowl. So for me, this is an A-.
Yeah, I'm not a Hairston guy. He's not in my top 50. I would have gone with an edge, Ezraku maybe to help with Bosa's kind of injuries. If they wanted a cornerback, I would have gone with someone else. Maybe a Jacob Parrish Jr. I know I'm higher on him than anyone else, but for me, it's a C. I don't hate this pick. It's not terrible. I just didn't really love it. I think I kind of I'm getting, maybe I'm just for no reason because they're not the same player, but I'm getting that kind of Kaya Elam, drafting a corner late with the kind of end of the first round pick. I just I don't know. I don't love it, but that's why it's a C. And then penultimately, sorry, the Packers. Jesus, I'm so finished.
The long day or long night rather.
Yeah, jeez Louise. The Eagles at 31 took Jihad Campbell, and I'm just going to say something new.
Yeah.
He can't keep getting away with it.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. It's an A+, and I just, oh god, the Eagles and the Ravens just, they really annoy me, man, because they just make the best decisions every time. They make drafting look so easy, and to get Jihad Campbell at 31, it's simple. They don't really need. I guess they do need linebackers. They've got Zach Bourne. They just draft the best player available, and they just will put him somewhere.
Yeah,
simple as that.
Yeah,
and it's an A+ pick.
Yeah, I mean, look, Jihad Campbell was recruited to play edge. Like this guy, I'm sure if they wanted him, they could kind of look at moving him more to a full-time edge position. But his coverage ability is so unique, and his ability in zone coverage is fantastic. And Howie Roseman does it again, getting the 13th ranked player at 31, make the strength stronger. They had such success with Zach Bourne. They clearly know how to develop players like that. It's an A+. It's just the most Eagles pick ever. It's not a Georgia player, so it's not like the Eagles pick. But, I mean, it's literally the same thing every single time. Like, Howie Roseman looks at the consensus board, takes the best player, and it works. Like, people hate on it. Do it yourselves. Like, why wouldn't you? And then, finally, the Chiefs trading back to 32, obviously wanting to mimic the fact that they won the Super Bowl, even though they didn't. Took Josh Simmons from Ohio State. What do you make of that?
Tackle was a massive positional need for the Chiefs. Obviously, if you saw the Super Bowl, got absolutely embarrassed. I thought he was my tackle number tackle number 3, I believe. I had him in the 20s range. So for me, this is an A-. And this is a great pick. And also managed to get picks with it as well. Obviously not that much over moving up one, but still an A- pick for me.
I've gone A+. I mean, the injury obviously might be a bit more serious than us kind of civvies know about for him to fall this far. But I mean, he was some people's offense OT1. He was my OT3 as well, 3-4. To get that at 32 and, injury we don't know about, so we can't speak to, but look, you got Josh Simmons at 32. I think if you told Chiefs fans that you weren't going to have to draft like Arianti Ursary or take a Donovan Jackson and hope that he can play tackle for you, I don't know. To get Josh Simmons at 32 for the Chiefs, good get, A+. So I'm not going to put up a graphic of all of our grades because I don't have the time and I'm just going to post this as is, but we are going to be coming out with more draft content. We're going to be doing our whole, we're going to be going, AFC, NFC draft grade as a whole. So, and these first round grades, like I said, they might change with the rest of the draft. If they, address other needs, then perhaps we can kind of look at changing them. And we might we're tired. Maybe we're not in the clearest of mindsets. We just wanted to get a video out for you guys. So giving our immediate kind of draft takes. So make sure you subscribe for more draft content. Make sure you subscribe for more off-season content. We'll be coming at you with that as well. And leave a like as well if you've enjoyed. Leave a comment. Let us know your favourite pick, your least favourite pick. Let us know your thoughts on our draft grades. But I've been your host, Dom Corbs. That's my co-host, Nick Corbs. We've been Corbs NFL. We'll see you on the next video.
See ya.